We have a question from Mr. Mohammad Atif Agaz. What is the drawback of blockchain technology? Are there any drawbacks of blockchain technology?
So, so as I mentioned, this creation of a block, verification by others, all of these basically they require a lot of computational power. And when you can imagine, lots of computers are being used simultaneously in order to verify a transaction. We can understand that in an isolated way or in a one-off way, it is okay. But when we imagine a whole lot of transactions, especially if you look at how a big company works or how IP registry works, you can imagine the number of transactions. So for running that, you require a whole lot of energy. And energy crisis is something which is being predicted. Server capacity that draws from the environmental existence or the environmental health of a particular economy as well. So these are the predictions which are tied up with blockchain tech. So those are one disadvantage that we can think of, running these computers all the time. And also one problem that has been cited is, while we talk about this particular technology as being immutable, that no one can interfere with or tamper with this, there have been some fraudulent transactions which have taken place with respect to Ethereum, which is a cryptocurrency which runs on a blockchain. So the fact that the fraudulent activities occurred itself shows us that there may be some aspects which we have not yet covered. So blindly trusting that blockchain is a panacea, it provides a solution to all the problems that we face right now, that may not be correct. So a cautious approach is advocated.
Next question is from Mr. Atul Bhatt. Since transactions over blockchain requires validation from all the users, does it take too long to execute a transaction over a public blockchain?
When you have lots of participants in a network, you require that much more computational power to run this whole process. So that also takes some time. And unless and until we come across a solution to solve this particular problem, like I think the person with the question mentions rightly, that is also a drawback. Consumption of energy, especially if it is a public blockchain with numerous nodes, that will be a problem as well. Yes, you're right.
Dr. Prakash Kumar Sarangi, how to find consensus blockchains?
All blockchains run on consensus. So if this particular new block or the transaction which is now projected or which is put forward before the network is not accepted through consensus by verification by all nodes, it will not be added to the chain. So that would mean that the transaction is rejected because it is not accepted through consensus.
Next question is from Ms. Sasha Rinditra. Whether traditional medical secret knowledge can be protected under IP?
So traditional medicinal knowledge right now, it is being protected through Biodiversity Act. Section 6, if you want to do any kind of commercial development involving a traditional medicinal knowledge, you need to take permission from the biodiversity authorities which are established. And that is something for which, especially for a commercial nature, for a patent to be made. For instance, the Jeevani example, where a particular medicinal plant called Arogya Pacha was converted to a medicinal product which was launched by Ayurveda Pharmacy from Coimbatore. The permission was sought and patent was granted to the two scientists. So it can be done through the biodiversity regime. It can be done through the patent regime as well. And now I don't know if this is common knowledge, but Dr. Shashi Tharoor has now introduced a bill on traditional knowledge. So that is also something that is to be waited and watched. I think we'll see new developments in that field as well.
Next question is from Mr. Paneer Selvam again. Is there any connectivity between blockchain technology and cryptocurrency?
Cryptocurrency was the first publicly known, or it was basically the application of blockchain which exploded into the public knowledge or understanding, and that took away a lot of glamour. Cryptocurrency, the name itself, an alternative to national monetary regimes, it took up the interest of people, and that is how blockchains came into the it came to be known to the human psyche. But then if you look at the development of blockchain tech and its numerous applications, for instance, in agriculture also blockchains are being used. It seems like a surprising thing to us, but with a combination of artificial intelligence, IoT, as well as blockchains, there are predictions, there are real-time decisions being made on how to irrigate a particular land, and that's not happening in other countries, it's happening in India itself. So I think cryptocurrency is one application of blockchain, but I wouldn't say it is the most important application as yet.
Next question is from Mr. Ajay Patil. If someone has to access data of a block or blocks, does it need technical proficiency, or can it be accessed through any user-friendly interface so that non-software background people can understand data of block?
There are certain softwares, there are certain courses which help us to understand. Solidity is one where we can learn how to be a part of blockchain mechanism. There are people who are not really technologically equipped, who are regularly dealing with blockchains, who are regularly dealing with cryptocurrency. You can be a part of that as well. But generally, this particular, unless it is a public blockchain, you cannot be a part of it. And there are, like I said, there are certain platforms, there are certain organizations which which allow you to be a part of their network. To give you an example, if you have a photograph and if you register it with certain copyright protection agencies, they will enroll you, and your image can be a part of their database, which is encrypted and which is placed within the blockchain tech. And for verification with respect to when or in any case of question as to who's the creator, we can go back on that network and we can check whether this person who claims to be the owner is indeed the owner. So those kind of activities can be done, but it is not usually done by lay people. It is done by people who are in charge of that particular chain.
From Ms. Ananya, Madam, how blockchain technology can be applied to curb online piracy?
So as I mentioned, with respect to data, which is digital, the major problem that we used to have with online piracy is that you are able to create multiple copies, and there is no limit to these multiple copies. You can create lakhs and crores of these copies, and they can be distributed across the world to whoever wants it. And because this does not deplete the original resource, online piracy did not harm the actual, purchaser or actual user, because he can replicate that particular property without any harm to himself. So because of this nature of digital creations, piracy became rampant. In order to curb it, the understanding is that if you place it on a public platform, like Spotify, for instance, they were playing around with this idea of using blockchain. So any unauthorized downloading or any unauthorized retrieval of this digital creation from their network, it would automatically relate to, it would automatically notify a particular agency, or it would automatically deduct the money from the account to which this particular, the account from which it was downloaded is linked, which means that real-time payment takes place. So this is one example. There can be others. Like I mentioned earlier, the provenance, which can be checked. Who exactly is the person, whether the person is authorized. So the checking need not be done manually, it can be done digitally. So that can be one way. Or if you enable smart contracts, then we can make sure that only the person who has the sufficient authorization can download the piece of music or a piece of image or others. But even then, it's not really completely watertight, because we see a lot of unauthorized NFTs being sold in exchanges, because the digital images, you can download it purely from even Google Images. So while the site mentions that it is subject to copyright protection, no one actually honors that. But if it is included within blockchains, there is an understanding, there is an expectation that real-time payments, or in other cases, if there are counterfeits, they can be immediately understood. So these are the practical as well as digital applications of blockchain.
Next question is from Maitrey Sadhu. Recently, eBay has started the supply chain with blockchain. Madam, it would be great if you throw some light on what is the scope of intellectual property in such sphere.
As I mentioned earlier, with respect to these applications, if you look at application of blockchain, it is unlimited. I'll give an example. I don't know specifically about the eBay supply chain, but there are patent applications, there are trademark applications with respect to the use of blockchains in specific contexts. Now, to give you an example, McDonald's has obtained the trademark for McDelivery. And this particular McDelivery is supposed to operate in metaverse, which is the latest advancement as far as the the augmented reality, virtual reality context is concerned. So people are imagining things and how it would take place in the metaverse. So we are living in such a situation, and in order to answer your question with respect to how that particular intellectual property and blockchains are involved, as I mentioned, you can include the provenance checking and all of that in blockchains, but that is fundamentally a feature of blockchain. It has nothing to do with intellectual property as such. Coming to the specific nature of algorithm which they may use, they can obtain copyright. If it is a patentable method or a patentable process, or any other kind of invention falling within the definition of patentable invention with respect to your national legislation is concerned, you can patent it. So those are the ways in which intellectual property can be invoked to protect these kind of advancements. And if you look at inventions related to blockchain, you will find they include mentions of sometimes artificial intelligence. All of these seem to be interlinked, and that is also very surprising and very interesting to see. We are just beginning with the whole understanding, and I think lots more development are coming our way, and we have to keep a lookout for those.
Next question is from Mr. Rajaswamy Aldandi. Why we are unable to identify transactions in cryptocurrency? What are the main loopholes here? Why innocent Indians are getting cheated in cryptocurrency?
I think the government response is to kind of bring a regulatory restraint on blockchains, particularly not blockchains, private cryptocurrencies. So I think, as far as cheating is concerned, just like any other investment, we need to be aware of where we are putting our money. That is one thing. Secondly, cryptocurrency has a lot of negative connotations as well, particularly because of its anonymity. Now, if you look at coins, bitcoins, and others, and dog coins, and all these popular cryptocurrency, you find that the reason why most of the governments are hesitant to admit it is because of the challenge that it places before their traditional national monetary systems. There are some universities, technically advanced, probably universities, who even admit admission fees in the form of bitcoins. So there you have huge acceptance on one hand, and then you have regulatory hesitancy. So combining these two, I would say, again, to repeat what I said, I think it is our duty to be more cautious, and unless and until the aspects of these, especially with respect to the regulatory understanding, is clear, it would be wise not to jump into the bandwagon. At the same time, one of the reasons why the regulatory hesitancy happens is because of the way that black money is being converted to white money over the dark web. There is no tracking mechanism using things like VPN and others. You're not able to track who is the buyer and who is the seller. As I mentioned earlier, there are some legitimate exchanges wherein these transactions happen with regulatory oversight, and many others wherein it does not. There are also some exchanges wherein plainly illegal assets are also being exchanged. So unless and until there is a global kind of a mechanism, I'm not sure what we can do right now. But I think, again, to kind of reiterate what I said earlier, I think caution is basically what is advised right now.
There is another question on the same area from one Mr. Ritvik. These private blockchains like Dash and Zcash platforms allow users to transact without making the data public. If there is unlawful or unauthorized use of these private cryptocurrencies, how could the law enforcement authorities trace or track the culprit?
Exactly, this is the point I was trying to say. So if you don't have any kind of regulatory oversight, then the way that this functions and also the outcomes which may happen, for instance, there were some reports which came out that cryptocurrencies are being misused to aid drug trafficking, human trafficking, also terrorism to a certain extent. There are a whole lot of crimes being taking place, and these happen in dark web, where even if you look at the most advanced cyber police or the law enforcement mechanism, they may fall short, and that is no one's fault, but that is the way it is. I think we need to equip our surveillance as well as our law enforcement agencies as well. And as I mentioned, this is a major problem, especially with cryptocurrencies.
One Mr. Santosh, is it possible to identify whether a block is tampered with? Also, how it affects the other blocks in the blockchain?
So as I mentioned earlier, when you are trying to involve or when you're trying to include a new block, at that point there is a very clear consensus which is to be present if it is to be added to the original block or original blockchain. The question is, if any block in the chain, which is not a new block, which is an existing block, is to be tampered with and the data modified, would it be possible to get away with it without other nodes or other peers being wise about it? The answer is, hypothetically, theoretically, if you have a system with huge in the sense it should be beyond our understanding, that kind of computational power, you can. So theoretically, this is also possible. Why we say it is immutable is because in the ordinary parlance, no one has access to such a system which has such enormous, ginormous supercomputational power. So that is the answer.
Question from Ms. Lakshmi Bhavani. How well is public personal data protected in blockchain as it has to be validated from other users? How well is data protected from smart contract in case of automation?
So as I mentioned earlier, when there is data which is to be kept as personal or private, we do not want the system to have a public disclosure. So that is the reason why there has to be a compromise. And when we talk about the data inherent in it, we need to understand that the verification and consensus with respect to verifying the new block coming in, it happens in the nature of proof of work. It happens in the nature of transaction, which is like a puzzle which is put forward, and on solving those they will be rewarded with a particular with some particular reward. So in the context of cryptocurrency, this process is called mining, and based on the proof of work which is submitted by the nodes, bitcoins or the value of that particular proof of work would be added to your account, and that is basically how bitcoins work. Similarly, in a blockchain which has a record of transactions as well, the same thing happens. The data may be kept private, and the proof of work may not have anything to do with what exactly is contained within the block. So that is the answer.
Mr. Devendra Singh Tomar, how would the blockchain solve the problems or related to fraud with respect to purchasing of real property like house, plot? Is it possible to provide a solution with the help of blockchain?
I think all registration systems can be tied up with blockchain, because the idea is that there is a proof of ownership, there is a provenance, there is a continuity of transactions. And if you think about it that way, who's the actual owner? Their existence or their authorization has to be cross-checked through other references. And only through that authorization can their identity as the owner of this property be established. So unlike a transaction which takes place over the physical realm, probably in a blockchain, this kind of provenance authentication checking becomes more relevant. But also, if you look at banks and how they function, the understanding is that there is a very strong centralized machinery. But even within banks, we find that there are lots of fraudulent transactions which take place, about which people come to know, even the banks come to know, only after some significant time has lapsed. So that difficulty may be solved by a trustless system. That is the theory.
Next question is from Mr. Ajay Patil. Without government intervention and lack of infrastructure, with general public to verify the authenticity, is it possible for a handful of organizations acting as intermediaries for general public to monopolize this field of blockchain and cryptocurrency with peer-to-peer verification of blocks?
Yes, sir. So the answer for that lies in the fact probably that there are some governments which have taken up blockchains as a very serious kind of an initiative. Estonia, which is an example. In certain European countries, certain registries are looking into the possibility. But if you look at it right now, in all situations, it is always the public sector which has the monopoly over these kind of technologies. Government usually is the purchaser, or it has to rope in the private sector to contribute to its structuring as well as to add to its governmental mechanism. So I have seen examples wherein there is collaboration between the government and private sectors, especially in the example that I gave earlier with respect to development of institutions which can train people with respect to blockchains, that we can see in, I think Hyderabad has one, in Kerala we have one, in Delhi I think they have started one. So they have these kind of collaborations happening, which is a good thing. But otherwise, if you look at artificial intelligence, it's never the governments, it is never the public sector which has any say over it. It is dependent on the largesse by the private parties. That is the case always. And I don't think it is going to change.
Thank you, madam, for your detailed answers and clarifications to the queries. Even there is the national strategy on the blockchain, which is unveiled in 2021. Even India is
Yes.
working towards this. Any comments, ma'am, from your side on the strategy document?
No, I have not looked into it in detail, but I think it is definitely a good thing, because we have all these papers which are being written by institutions like Niti Aayog looking into the possibility of incorporating these technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain. It's actually heartening to see, to understand what the potential is and how best to incorporate them within our governance systems. So I think these are all, very important endeavors. And like I said, both central as well as state governments are trying to do more. And these are all really very heartening things. Gives us more hope.
Yes, madam. Thank you so much, madam. One question has come up, ma'am. Ma'am, can bank schemes be copyrighted or patented, as no other bank can offer the same or similar scheme?
So bank schemes in the sense, so if you look at it from the American angle, the Alice Corporation case and cases after that, they talk about this application of a twin test to determine whether a particular scheme, a method of doing something, a financial system, or a hedge fund system, all of those which can be understood as an application of a computer program, they need to pass an additional caveat, they need to pass an additional qualifier in order to be patentable, namely that it is not just an abstract theory, but that it should have an inventive effect. And that application seems to be reflected in many contexts in the European Union with respect to the understanding of the directive as well. In India, as I mentioned, the Farid-Alani case also, it makes that important distinction. But a scheme as such, if it falls within a method of doing something, then I don't think it can be patented. Depends. It's not something for which we can give a straightforward answer. It is a very much a case by case decision to be made by the examiner.
Thank you so much for your patiently answering the queries. Now I request Professor G.B. Reddy sir to please take over the session.
Thank you, Athira ma'am. It has been a wonderful session, and your live examples of the application of blockchain technology, then even the instances regarding the cryptocurrency, they have been very appropriate. About the traditional knowledge, you mentioned about the bill introduced by Mr. Shashi Tharoor. Probably what is going to happen if at all the bill is passed. I think it's a private member's bill, if I'm not mistaken. Governments normally don't relish the idea of passing or enacting private members' bills, but nonetheless, it's a good attempt from defensive protection to positive protection to TK. If it is possible, nothing like it. Then other important aspect is about the bank schemes and all. I think already there is some precedent from USA, but in India, so long as the idea is taken up or it is incorporated in a different form, I don't think IP will definitely be excluded from that purview. Then after listening to you now, I think most of us are certain that blockchain technology would be like any other technology in the near future. Already one step has been taken forward in the recent budget speech, where cryptocurrencies are sought to be, recognized. So in the next line, I'm very sure that the blockchain technology would be recognized, if not regulated, and like what happened to our electronic signatures, previously digital signatures, the same thing might happen in the case of blockchain technology also. So it has been a lively session. Our participants got immensely benefited. And in fact, all of us learned, certain new things about this. Maybe we need one more session on this. Some of the participants also made a mention in the, in fact, chat. And the very fact that even at this hour, we have, almost 100 participants. And at one point of time, it was, reaching about 200. For major part of the lecture, it was between 160 and 200. That shows the kind of interaction that took place. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you in our future lectures and interactions as well.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure.